I'd like to welcome everyone to this morning's webinar, Why Timber is Leading Construction's Net Zero Recovery, which is hosted in association with the Confederation of Timber Industries. I am Thomas Lane, the Technical Editor of Building. The industry has suffered a massive setback because of the lockdown. The Construction Leadership Council has set out a three-stage road to recovery plan to be delivered over 2 years. Modern methods of construction will be a key part of helping the industry achieve the aims set out in the roadmap. Timber is an important part of that recovery and has a crucial role in helping us move towards the 2050 net zero carbon target. Today, you will hear about the CLC's road to recovery, how developers are using off-site manufacturing and timber to drive efficiency, and also a comparative view of France, which is recently introducing a requirement of public buildings to be 50% timber, or I think there's some caveats around that one. I am joined by a panel of 3 experts. Simon Rawlinson is the Head of Strategic Research and Insight at Arcadis UK, and is also responsible for strategy, communication and thought leadership at the Construction Leadership Council. Jonathan Falkingham is the founder and creative director of Urban Splash, and Sylvia Maligari is the Secretary General of the European Organization of the Sawmill Industry. So the format of today's webinar will be each presenter will speak for probably about 10 minutes, and once the presentations are over, we will take questions. So I encourage everybody in the audience who's listening to think of your questions and submit them using the online question facility, and then we'll consider those after all the presentations are finished. So in terms of the running order, I'm going to hand over now to Simon, who is going to take us through the CLC's Road to Recovery roadmap. So Simon, over to you.
Right. Okay, so hopefully my screen is coming up there. Is that okay there, Thomas?
That is there, yeah, that's great.
Excellent. Well, firstly, thank you very much for having the opportunity again to present the roadmap to recovery. I'm in a position as very much as I am not a timber expert, but what I'm going to try and do is position some of the characteristics of timber in the context of some of the critical parts of the recovery plan. I'm going to gallop through these slides pretty quickly. The first one I have to do, picking up Thomas's theme, is very much to sort of reflect on the scale of the correction that COVID has created in the construction industry. That decline there, 25% in the year, currently forecast by the Construction Products Association, is genuinely unprecedented. And in a crisis that has probably seen the word used unprecedented probably more than ever before, I think this is one which we can genuinely say that applies. And what that, of course, that does is it has a massive short-term impact on the way in which, say, for example, cash is flowing through the industry, and it also then starts to have a quite significant effect on, let's say, for example, confidence in people who want to invest in the industry, create new capacity and such like. So both very important elements. Now, the next thing I want to then just pick up is around, just get rid of that email coming in, was a recovery of what's going on in the recovery plan itself. And I'm going to come back to this in a little bit more detail. But what you'll see, the first thing there is it's aimed at increasing the level of activity across the ecosystem. So that means that the materials and the manufacturing sector is probably as important as the people delivering the work on site. So it's very much a sort of holistic approach. And then this idea of sort of like accelerating the adjustment to a new normal, and a new normal has to be a more productive and more sustainable new normal. So then you can start to see the clues around direction towards net zero, direction towards wider utilization of offsite prefabrication, for example. 3 phases, I'll come back a little bit later on. And then I just want to sort of heighten some of the successes at the bottom of that slide there. And that, I think, is the idea to give this got genuine credibility. So rather than being sort of like a nice PowerPoint that makes everybody feel a little bit comfortable with this, you can see lots of work about accelerating site opening, lots of work about planning to make it easier to either keep working now or to extend permissions in the future, and some long-term work as well. Say, for example, the CIH value framework, which is a 5 capitals tool, which will get people to think more about, say, for example, natural capital, more about sort of human capital and innovation. So some really good complementary elements there. Now, one of the important things about the recovery plan is it is genuinely collaborative. And this is, again, probably an unprecedented slide in terms of having all of these different organizations working in a single direction, collaborating to accelerate the recovery of the industry. And that's a massive positive, because if you can imagine, you've got the material suppliers, you've got contracting organizations, you've got designers, and they're all starting to sing from the same hymn sheet. So that has been one of the real positives from the outbreak, and it's something that we're determined to build on. And now getting into the real meat of this. Now, this is a 3-stage plan, each with 3 sort of key areas of priority. And if you go and download the full plan, you'll then see that there's another page for each of these stages. So I don't intend to go through in much detail. There is a lot to it, and I'd recommend that everybody goes and digs it out. Easy to find on the Construction Leadership Council website. You'll see that Restart is focused on trying to get as much of the existing work going on as possible. And if you think about something like the recent announcements around retrofit funding, fast money to get as many people working on site as possible. And once you've got that set up, that's a project, that scheme up and running. So very important that you get that money flowing through quickly. The reset stage is more about saying, how can we give the supply chain greater confidence around the workload that's coming up, and also how we can use some of the clever things that have been developed, say, over the last couple of years with the Construction Innovation Hub to address the productivity challenges that we're going to have post-COVID. So rather than thinking, let's go back to doing what we did before, we can't be as productive because we can't have so many people working on site, we're now thinking about what can we do about component utilization, for example, to mean that we need fewer people on site and therefore we're more resilient. And then the final bit about reinvent, that's probably the area that actually aligns most strongly with the net zero carbon and the product innovation elements. You'll see that the bit about transformation, that really knits in the work of the Construction Innovation Hub now into its 2nd year of operation. So really important that we start to take the learnings from the work which they're doing. Then the work around Procure for Value, which was launched last week on the 2nd anniversary of the sector deal. So again, some great work there. And then this idea of partnerships. And if you can imagine, really strong partnerships between manufacturers, between standards organizations, between clients, designers, to start coming up with these great solutions. Now, just then to like getting that into the sense of some concrete, what are we going to get out of this? I've split this into UK PLC and construction sector, and I think it's always worthwhile reflecting that all of the stuff around the sector deal, all of these kind of recovery plans, they're generally set around delivering better outcomes to UK PLC. And you might have noticed that Rishi Sunak, in launching the comprehensive spending review this week, had a really strong push saying we're going to be making sure that we get value for money and outcomes from these things. So very important. So valuable economic and social infrastructure, so better schools, hospitals, homes you'd expect. So that's a good sign for us as a sector. Reducing carbon emissions perfectly aligns with the timber agenda. And then some of these societal needs, I think, would also include introducing more manufacturing capacity in local areas, so resilient industry. And on the side of the construction bit, the elements I'll probably highlight here are the ones around the innovation culture aligned to productivity, and the skills and industry diversity bit. And that's people, and it's also players as well. And just wrapping up in terms of what does that mean for the timber sector, and I've obviously not put a no in there, but I put some maybes. And So you'll see there's a very strong alignment to net zero carbon, as you'd expect. And of course, that's something which will have to be detailed out over a period of time. More strongly, there's a really massive push towards component-based design. So again, if somebody wanted to have a look on the website around platform-based design principles and think about how timber components might fit into that, that's a huge opportunity. I've talked about value models based on 5 capitals, so a very strong element, again, which we can push, so it's pushing against an open door, and this idea around investment in skills. Now, the maybe bit is element of it's a 2-year program. So has the industry got the investment and the scale to respond to this, particularly thinking a lot of structural timber comes from Europe at the moment rather than the UK. Then we've got to think about a lot of the spend is actually going to be around remediation rather than new build. So there's a question mark around how quickly the new build sector can come back. And then again, I'd say there's this issue around the retrofit for decarbonisation is probably going to dominate the area around net zero rather than new build. So there's a bit of a sort of like having to shout out a little bit more loudly about the contribution of new build to the net zero target. And then finally, there's this one around where, if you imagine where the government's focus is on. So the government's focus is on schools, hospitals, because it talked about that in its manifesto. It's talking about productivity, so it's thinking about railways and roads. So how you navigate to find the space for timber construction in that kind of set of priorities, I think is a really interesting opportunity for the sector. So I'm going to finish there, and I'm looking for some great questions later. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks very much, Simon, for your presentation. And before we move on, I've just got one sort of quick question for you. So, I mean, the CLC came up with the recovery plan a little while ago now. So, how do you think the industry is actually doing right now in terms of recovery when it comes to meeting the recovery plan?
Well, I think as I had on that sort of opening slide, there's been quite a lot of quite good positive uptake in terms of the kind of steps that were needed to help the industry. And a good example of that would be the announcement this week around provisions for local authorities to provide greater flexibility around operating hours. And I think what that then builds on, it appears that quite a lot of organisations have been quite successful in getting their productivity not up to levels where they were in February, March, but as close as you possibly can. So I think people are in that kind of space. At the same time, I think we do have to be realistic about just potentially how much harm was done around the shock in April and June in terms of just how much cash was lost. So I think that's something which we just need to watch out in terms of the health of the supply chain and see how they're coming back. But I think considering how badly the sector was affected, we're not doing badly. But at the same time, I wouldn't want to be too optimistic about saying we're out of the woods yet.
Okay, well, great. Well, thanks very much, Simon. We're now going to move on to Jonathan Falkingham from Urban Splash. And just as a quick reminder to our other presenters, if you're not actually speaking, if you wouldn't mind muting your microphone during the other person's presentation. So, Jonathan, I'm going to now hand over slide control to you, and we look forward to your presentation.
I think. Good. Can everybody see that? And can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah. We're working well.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm just going to give a quick kind of take from a house builder perspective on this subject. So House is a relatively new business, actually, coming out of a piece of work that Urban Splash has been doing for a couple of years. Last year, we formed a really important partnership with Sekisui House, who are Japan's largest house builder, building something like 50,000 homes a year. So on a world stage, they're a big player. 75% of their homes are already carbon zero, and all of them are built in factories. So they're well ahead of the curve in terms of a UK perspective in this space. And of course, we've got Homes England as well as an equity partner in the business, and that's great. And they're very keen to support the kind of work we're doing. To give you a little bit of background, I'm going to play a quick video. So I'm just going to see if that loads. Is that working? Yeah, no, oh, hang on. There we go. Great. So, and the reason I put that in really is just to kind of give a bit of a scene setting to our aspirations as a business. We really want to disrupt the house building industry in the UK. It's, in our view, it's kind of stagnated really, and doesn't provide customers with an awful lot of choice. And we think there's a huge market there to do something slightly different. Where we are at the moment is we've got an emerging product range, and that's just some of the stuff you can see on the screen there now. And you know, there's a few key things in here which all of the products share in common, and that is we want our homes to be bigger generally, because UK's got the smallest homes in Europe, and actually they've been getting smaller over the last 20 years. We want more flexible homes because actually the house building industry doesn't really give a lot of choice here, so we want to give customers the ability to configure their own homes and create homes they want to live in for themselves. And we want our homes to be naturally as sustainable as they possibly can be, and that's a journey we're on. We haven't got it right yet, I wouldn't say, but we're definitely ambitious in our plans for that, and certainly with Seki City House, keen to push that as hard as we can. You know, and getting modern, well-designed homes, you know, which I think is missing in the market, is really key to us. And the big thing I think there is factory standards, and that's about providing not just quality, but speed, lower waste, less energy, and less noise and disruption on site. I think all those things are key, I think, to this conversation. A key product, and I'll be very brief on this, a key product we've developed, the first product actually is called Townhouse. It was in the video, you saw a few images of it. It's effectively a 2- and 3-story house. Customers can configure it, you get 72 house types, loads of finishes, it's modular. We build it in our factory, we build timber cassette wall panels, we assemble wall panels into boxes, into pods, so that's them being assembled there. We then completely fit them out, so they're completely finished internally. We shrink wrap them and deliver them to site. So that's one being delivered there. And then ground floor going in, first floor going in, second floor going in, and we can typically do about 3 3-story houses a day with these modules, providing the site's ready to take them. So it's really fast and quick and efficient. And then of course we've got to zip up at the end. And there's a completed scheme up in the northeast, one in Salford. So we've done quite a few of these houses now, and we're refining the products as we go. So that's in the factory. It's all timber, and timber's given us the flexibility, I think, to be able to deliver that particular product, and it works really well. But I wanted to particularly talk to you about Mansion House, which is a product we've been working on for a couple of years. It's a mid-rise apartment building. So I'm just going to move on. And the idea is this will be a key part of our range. We'll be able to do it on lots of our sites. So typically it's 4 floors, 5 floors, or 6 floors. We can arrange them in terraces, crescents, and squares. So it's quite flexible. And then the floor plans are quite key here, because one of the things we're keen to do is make sure all our homes dual aspect. They've got high ceilings, really good lights. So this is a dual aspect plan arrangement, and for apartments, you don't see very much of this around actually. So it's 2 apartments nested around a core. So you do get cross ventilation, you get great views, and you also get lots of natural light. Importantly, like our townhouse product and all our products, our customers get to choose the fit out. So on these plans, you might be able to detect there's some variance, but you can effectively get a 2-bed, 2-bath kind of conventional arrangement into the space. But you can also get have an open plan kind of loft apartment if you want, and other choices in between. There's 9 different choices. We've got planning for quite a lot of this over the UK. This is the one in Manchester, which we are building at the moment. Now, I mean, interestingly, we couldn't build that in our factory because it didn't really suit volumetric. So we really had to explore, well, what other approaches could we take? And we looked at everything actually. And we're particularly drawn to this kind of diagram really, that there's been a lot of focus on operational carbon in the house building industry, and that's very relevant to customers. So that's about how much energy they may or may not use. But actually, there's this whole thing about the embodied carbon, the whole life carbon, and we're keen to do what we can to tackle the embodied carbon side of our business. So as part of our explorations, we became very interested in engineered mass timber, and in particular, cross-laminated timber. It's a relatively new technology in relation to more established technologies, but it does really open up some amazing opportunities for the industry. You know, and I think people might be familiar with diagrams like this, but there's a virtuous circle here with using timber, renewable timber, and you know, and that's part of the story. But for us, you know, if we're not going to go volumetrically, we want to go MMC and component based, and keep it as simple as possible so that we can build quickly, efficiently, and to very high standards. So cross-laminated timber is fantastic. You can turn it up, you know, it turns up. We can just kind of put it together very, very quickly. We can then put components inside the home and fit it out, and external components as well. So the idea with this is all the components are manufactured and just assembled on site. This is actually the live site in Manchester. So it's all precision engineered. It comes to site pre-cut and just craned into position straight off the back of a lorry. The entire structure for this building was delivered on 38 lorries. So that's less than one apartment per lorry, so very few traffic movements to site. This is a view down, but effectively what's great about CLT is it can do all your primary structure, walls, floors, and roofs. And for us, it's great because one subcontractor can effectively do the structural shell of the building in one go. So we're not crossing trades. Interestingly, really simple to erect on this building, 1 crane operator, 6 operatives, and only small power tools to erect. So it's actually quite quiet on site as well. So it's really good in built-up areas for neighbours and what have you. Zero waste. I mean, this isn't from our site, but actually there's no waste on this because we're not cutting anything up or doing anything. We're just assembling. So no skips required in this phase of the work. So really great. And this is it probably a couple of months ago now, but took 12 weeks to install the whole structure here. And interestingly, I mean, on the carbon side of it, through some kind of industry calculator, which our supplier has helped us with, It's 1,130 tons of sequestered CO2 in this building. So so that's great, and it gets us off to a really, really good start, and that's much, much better than could be achieved with other more traditional technologies. However, we've still got to finish the building, so that's not the end of the story on the carbon footprint side of it. So we've clearly got to deal with all the exterior components, but we're trying to keep them as simple as possible. And like with the CLT, we can turn up on, it's an assembly thing on site, not a making thing on site. And internally, it's the same thing as well. But I think one of the things that really excites us about CLT is that it's a material that can do so many different things, and it can deal with structure, we can deal with fire, we can deal with sound, we can deal with compartmentation and party walls. But it also looks really great, and it actually isn't used much in this way in the UK. It is in private houses and stuff like that, but not many people expose it. And what's great about exposing it is we can minimise finishes, so there's less materials going into the building at the end, and that saves on time, saves on money, and saves on carbon footprint. And we think it looks really great, and customers will really, really love it. So these are just some images of it. Ceilings are 2.7 high, 2.8, in fact 2.8 meters high. So this will be finished later this year. So I'm going to conclude now, really. I mean, as a business, we're on a journey with this. We certainly don't have all the answers. We're very excited about what we can do with some of this technology. We do believe that mass engineered timber is exciting, and we can deliver great buildings with it. And I think it will really help. It could really help the industry achieve some of its carbon reduction targets. And we as a business are very, very committed to exploring this further and introducing it to a wider product range. And this, for example, is our current sales suite design, which we'll put on all our sites. This happens to be in Cambridge, and here's one being built now. And we think it's great because it kind of demonstrates what you can do with CLT. I think it'll be great for engaging customers and inspiring our customers and bringing them on the story, bringing them on the journey with us on that. But I think that is me. I hope I've stayed within the 10 minutes. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks very much, Jonathan, for your presentation. It's really interesting. I was thinking about your relationship with Sekisui House, which is I've seen the videos, amazingly automated production process using robots, a bit like a car factory. I mean, thinking about timber and the potential of timber, how does timber lend itself as a material that you would process in a factory to a very highly automated production system? And this is something you're exploring.
Yeah, I mean, certainly with the CLT, that is fully automated. If you've been to CLT plants, you'll see how they do that. So that's great. In our factory, we're on a journey with this. I mean, we're still building fairly conventionally. You could argue we're building pretty much like we'd build it on site, just in dry conditions. But the tech is out there to mechanize all of that. It's a matter of capital investment, and the right time to make that would be my take on it. We're not there yet with it.
Great. Well, thanks very much. So I'm now going to hand over to Sylvia, who's going to talk about the timber in France.
Okay, can you see the presentation or not yet?
Yes, we can. You just need to maximize your screen.
Yeah, just 1 second. Sorry for that. Okay, so thank you very much for this invitation. Silvia Meregari, I am the Secretary General of the European Organization of the Sawmill Industry. My presentation is just a little bit broader than just talking about what is happening in France. We are going to start with some numbers that are essential, because when we are talking about wood promotion, we cannot disregard the wood availability. So let's look at some numbers. So according to the Global Forest Resource Assessment presented in 2020 by FAO, in the world, the total forest area is 4.06 billion hectares, which means 31% of the total land area. While Africa had the largest annual rate of net forest loss in 2010-2020, Asia, followed by Oceania and Europe, had the highest net gain of a forest area in the same time framework. Globally, only 30% of all forest is used primarily for production of wood and non-wood forest product. That means that only 1/4 of the harvested forest is actually used for wood application, solid wood. So we still have, from a forestry point of view, a potential in wood availability that can be explored. And why I'm saying this? By 2050, the world economy is expected to quadruple. The global population is going to reach 9.2 billion, and a growing population requires more food, more industrial products, more energy, and also more housing. Establishing a resource-efficient and climate-friendly economy is central to the green growth presented by Europe, but also in the current EU recovery plan. And two pieces of legislation will be essential for all member states to promote wood in construction. One is the Circular Economy Action Plan that has been already presented in March. The other piece of the legislation is the renovation wave that is expected in September by the European Commission. Without doubt, legally harvested wood products from sustainable forest management can play a key role in green solution and in green buildings. So if we look at the forestry sector, we have overall a positive effect that is estimated to 600 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent annually. And this corresponds to 20% of all fossil emission in the European Union. It has been published in a recent study titled Climate Effect of the Forest-Based Sector in the European Union. So there is no doubt that harvested wood product has a key role in decarbonizing overall the economy and the building sector. So as I mentioned before, there's not only France that is promoting actually the use of wood in construction. If we look at the national accounting plans produced by member states under the LULUCF regulation, just to mention three countries, Austria, Finland, France, have all recognized that timber in construction play a key role. The role of promoting wood in construction that has been recognized in the strategy of Finland for climate-friendly economy as long-term storage carbon. France is presenting a national low-carbon strategy that emphasizes maximizing the substitution effect of the storage of carbon in wood product, particularly through an intensified use of wood in construction, is key for the country. It should be recalled that regulating construction work belongs to the competence of member states, and the EU legal framework for marketing construction products is based on the principle of technological neutrality, meaning we cannot have actually at European level a legislation that emphasize or recognize explicitly that wood should be used more compared than other material. It should be noted that the EU and the WTO rules are material neutral. Wood per se may not be promoted, but may be encouraged indirectly on a competitive performance basis, which apply to all alike products, meaning through standard recognition of the benefits of using wood. I mentioned it before. On 11 March, the Commission has adopted the Circular Economy Action Plan, which highlights the benefits of long-term carbon storage in the wooden and construction. The European Commission is expected to publish by 2023 a regulatory framework for certification of carbon removals. At the same time, the work will already start in September to try to understand how this regulatory framework can work. And the European Commission is also already starting another revision, the revision of the construction product regulation, in order to include in this regulation all aspects related to circularity of the material. As I said before, the Renovation Wave initiative, that is key for the recovery plan presented recently by the European Commission and expected to be published in September, is going to be a tool for promoting more wood in construction. The European Parliament, and in particular the ITRE committee, has already highlighted the benefits of our material in building renovation and new building construction. In particular, and I'm going to read, the ITRE committee has called the Commission and Member States to incentivize the use of natural and low carbon building material during major building renovation and new building construction. Moreover, the Parliament has also highlighted that sustainable building material, such as certified wood, are essential for achieving low carbon and long-lasting building stock, and that construction opens an opportunity to store carbon into bio-based building products in the limit, of course, of sustainable availability. So these are already very important points and very important statement by the European Parliament. But this is not all. 2 weeks ago, EEA, so the European Environmental Agency, has published a new report stating about the contribution of wood products in sustainable building and in a circular economy perspective. The EEA report clearly emphasized that wood products are better for the environment and better as construction material from an environment point of view. So I was asked to mention about what is happening in France. France is the country that traditionally uses concrete as construction material. But since 2016, wooden construction raised plus 13% in sale turnover. In terms of material share, it means that 6% market share in housing, 27% in building extension, and 60% for non-residential buildings is use wood material. France is characterized by hardwood wood species. For this reason, the French government is not only encouraging the use of wood per se, but is linking this to the hardwood wood species, and they would like to invest much more in hardwood species used in construction. Through an enhanced collaboration of the wood industry and the Ministry of Agriculture and Industry, France is also committed to build a wood frame Olympic village for the Paris Olympic Games in 2024. Of importance is also the development of standards I mentioned before. The French environmental regulation is going to be amended in 2020, and we have the introduction, together with energy efficiency in building, also of carbon footprint, energy consumption level, and carbon requirements for all new construction buildings. There will be also analysis on the whole life cycle and carbon storage during the building life. Moreover, France is also going to produce a bio-based national label that will be applied to new construction and also for renovation. So all these elements are of key importance, and they will be a key element for using more wood in construction. So we have seen it, and it was mentioned before, so there is no reason to spend more time on this. We have fantastic new application, glulam, CLT, prefabricated wood solution that can be used in building and can be disseminated as a tool for using more wood in construction. FAO has also published a new kind of collection of best practice by member states in the framework of the COVID crisis, in order to collect all of the new policies that are already in place in several countries like Sweden, but also New Zealand and Germany, and that are a tool for using wood in construction. If we look at the Swedish municipality of Vaxio, there is a building strategy with wood since 2005. And already by 2020, it was expecting that all new buildings would have been built out of wood. This strategy is also important because it includes a collaboration between industry and the university. Then we have New Zealand, who has advocated for a wood use from a local forest industry. The region of Freiburg in Germany, who has a dedicated policy to wood use in the private sector, but at the same time, they've linked this policy to locally sourced and certified wood. But we have also other examples, like in Australia, where we have the Make It Wood campaign, or in British Columbia, where since 2009, there is the Wood First Act implemented in order really to boost the consumption of wood. Us as industry in Brussels, we have produced a new brochure. It's called the Wood Building the Bioeconomy. This is a unique tool. It's a brochure, a booklet that summarizes all the elements that are necessary for promoting wood, for explaining to the policymaker the important characteristic of wood. And the booklet covers really all aspects that are essential, from sustainable forest management, UTR, certification, life cycle comparison. And this is, as I said, is what we use in our advocacy action at Brussels level. If you are interested, we can provide you with a copy of this. Thank you very much.
Great, well, thanks very much, Sylvia. That's a really interesting presentation, really interesting to see what other countries are doing to reduce their carbon footprints. If I can encourage our other speakers just to come back online. Jonathan, too, if you're there, and then we can start taking some questions from the audience. We've had quite a few questions come through, and if anyone's out there wants to continue submitting questions, please do so. One question that is coming up quite a lot, and thinking about Sylvia's presentation in particular, there's a lot of work being done overseas to encourage the use of more sustainable construction materials, including timber. In the UK, we have a ban on the use of combustible materials in cladding systems over 18 meters, and it looks like that's going to be reduced down to 11 meters. This seems to be rather inconsistent with our 2050 goal of net zero carbon. What are your thoughts of the panel on this apparent contradiction? Who'd like to go first?
As the non-expert, I can plug one in there. I think I think this is one of the classic situations where you have a very immediate problem, building safety, which gets a blanket response to it, and then you almost on the other side, you then need to start thinking about how practically do you get that to work within the wider context of net zero and such like. So I think my understanding of the position in the UK is that the timber industry is asking for exemptions for structural components, and that to some extent. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to bridge together the clear intent to give people the confidence that their homes are safe, and that is an absolutely essential priority for the industry. But at the same time, then you build in long-term flexibility to be able to use products, which clearly I can imagine it would be massively difficult for the kind of structural timber that Jonathan was demonstrating to catch fire in the way that say, for example, happened with combustible panels in Grenfell.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a huge issue, really. I mean, the project I showed, Mansion House, I deliberately showed that in a sense because this will get caught up in the ban if it happens. Now, interestingly, the proposed ban isn't evidence-based. The government have said that in their consultation document, and we, as a business, take fire safety and safety of other things very, very seriously. We've got one of the world's expert fire consultancies, Alton Fire, have actually done the fire strategy for the building. They're confident it's fine. So it puts us in a very kind of strange position where we're getting expert advice saying, well, what we've designed is okay, but the blanket ban would just kind of take that away. And I think the issue for us as a business would then be, and I think it would probably affect other businesses like ours, to what extent could we justify further investment in R&D, testing, my big fear is that if the ban goes through as proposed, and it may well not do, but if it does, that it'll actually take a lot of the investment out of research and development into what is a nascent industry, but a very, very important industry. And there's lots of knowledge and expertise in the UK on this topic as well. And so I think government have got to wrestle with this confinement. So I think if the ban goes ahead, but with the exclusion of structural timber, that's positive. I think when you speak to fire experts, quite a lot of them are saying the ban full stop isn't the right thing to go, the right way to go anyway. But I think the structural timber would really help businesses like ours, because that's where we want to invest time and effort.
And Jonathan, I mean, as a point of interest, it's really only relates to cladding. I mean, is it viable for you, assuming the ban goes ahead, to continue using CLT for floor slabs and internal structure, but using an alternative system for the facade?
Yeah, I mean, we've started to look at that. I mean, it's not ideal by any stretch of the imagination, and again, it's not evidence-based. You know, I mean, we're in the process of scoping out a load of very specific tests, fire tests, so we can actually test them in laboratories and get the test results for that. And I'm kind of hoping that we might have that in time to kind of persuade government that that actually what we're doing is safe.
Can I just make a further build on that? And this is in connection with the work that the Construction Innovation Hub is doing, which is combining sort of the design and also the certification by BRE of standard components. So what Jonathan's just described there, which gives people confidence that things will work and will be safe in a fire context, is very much supported by the idea that you use repeatable components that are proven to operate. And I think that alignment of a lot of the sector deal stuff with the kind of challenges that are being met with fire safety will help an awful lot. And I think if government starts to understand the implications of that, I think we can see a way through.
Right. And is it? I mean, I know that there's been some work done on standardising lightweight steel frame components. I think that's a seismic consortium, which is really interesting because you've got competitors coming together to develop standardised components. Have you seen anything like that in the timber sector?
I don't, as far as I'm aware, and I would have to say I don't know every single demonstration project and research projects that's been funded, but I do know, say, for example, that Stuart Milne, who are well known in terms of their timber frame operation, were funded as part of one of the biggest projects. So I suspect there are some elements in there, and it's been a very wide-ranging program.
Right, thank you. And Sylvia, I mean, the question earlier on about this apparent contradiction between net zero carbon targets, which obviously more than just the UK, and the specifics of a combustible cladding ban here. From your perspective in Europe, how does it look to you when you see what other countries are doing?
But first of all, I do not have technical expertise on the fire resistance of wood product. From a legislative point of view, what I can tell you is that the fire regulation are of national competence. Now, what we should be investigating if this is actually a technical barrier to trade, and it might actually represent an impediment of using wood compared to another material, and if this is justified. But as Jonathan said, apparently the British government has actually said that there are scientific evidence for put on this ban. Now the ban is not just on wood product, it's on combustible material, so they are already enlarging the scope. So from a legal point of view, when you look at the legal basis, it might sound correct. Now, we really have to play on standard. We should investigate what is actually in place in other member states, although UK is leaving EU, we can still make a comparison in order to evaluate if really the British decision is justified on evidence base, or actually there are elements that were not taken in consideration and should be taken into consideration in order to remove this ban. But you cannot put on the same level reaching the carbon neutrality and the fire ban, because safety is another piece of legislation, so they are not really comparable, unfortunately. So this is what it should be acknowledged. Just for your information, in Brussels, there is a very strong lobby from other sectors, like the cement and the steel industry. They're all in this platform for Fire Safety Europe, and they're really lobbying for fire safety in construction, both renovation, not renovation. There's even a study at European level on safety of a site. So it's a technical lobby that the wood industry has to engage much, much more, because as I said before, there is no doubt that wood is it's a positive material for the environment. There is no doubt about this. Now all the games are played at standard level.
Great, well, thanks very much, Sylvia. Just before we move on to the next point, I just had a message come through from Andrew Carpenter, who's the Chief Executive of the Structural Timber Association, to say that they are actually looking at standardisation at the moment. So that is actually very encouraging. Moving on to another area. I mean, when we're considering the role of timber in moving towards our net zero targets, there's a lot of talk about now about designing for reconstruction and what you do with materials at the end of life. How interested to know how timber fits into this? I mean, is it easy to reuse it at its end of life, or do you just have to accept that we've had the carbon savings and then use it for something else? Mulch it and put it on your gardens. I don't know. What is this something you thought about, Jonathan, at all, given your use of CLT and other timber?
We put, in fairness, we probably haven't given it enough thought, I would probably say, because hopefully we're building buildings that will last for a long time, and our customers are buying buildings off us that they'll enjoy for generations to come, and that's our primary focus, really. But I think that I showed, I mean, I only put it up on screen very briefly, but I did show a diagram showing what happens as timber comes out of use in buildings, and that that diagram kind of suggested that it can either go back into reuse in some way if it can be repurposed, or it can go into creating energy, and so you do end up with a kind of, it's still part of that virtuous circle.
If I'm just making an observation, this is probably a lesson learned from particularly automotive, where I think a lot of the innovation in enabling improved recycling has been all about connections between different components. So, and that I suspect is an area that is probably quite a bit of development is needed. But you referenced seismic earlier, which is actually a project which is all about designing connections so that you can bring component parts together that are simpler and less engineered. So I think you're absolutely right to identify it as an area where there's a lot to be done, but I think there's a route to be able to think about how you potentially can take a standard panel from one situation and reuse it somewhere else. But as Jonathan's rightly said, these are things that are going to be sitting around for what, 70, 100 years potentially as a structure. That's a pretty minor worry, I would have thought, but I think that potential's there.
Okay.
In any case, when you look at the circularity of the material, it's not just circularity of the material per se, but there's also the carbon circularity, because it is true that once you have finished the life cycle of the wood product, you can burn it, but in all this circle, you maintain the carbon neutrality, because even when you burn it, you have to consider that there's been a replantation phase in the forest. So the carbon that you have been storing finally will be eventually released during the burning phase, but it has been absorbed already by the trees that we have been replanting. So we have double aspect of circularity of the material and the carbon circularity of the wood product. And another thing that sometimes we underestimate is how long a wood product can last. And we actually find out that in Switzerland, there is a house as old as Notre Dame of Paris. So it's unbelievable old. It's a wooden house, and it even survived the fire of the village. So honestly, wood product can last as long as we want.
Thanks, Sylvia. I've probably got time, probably just one more question now. I've had a few questions really coming through about the cost, the comparative costs of using timber versus other materials. So I think first two parts maybe. So one person's asking if is there a cost saving using off-site construction and engineered timber versus traditional construction, and another question is actually asking how using CLT would compare to alternative construction methods like lightweight steel framing. I guess Jonathan, you probably looked into this in some detail.
Yeah, I mean, the answer at the moment is probably slightly more expensive on the CLT than you would do it traditionally. But I think for us, what we're trying with CLT at the moment, virtually every building that gets built is a one-off building. So every time you design it, there's a whole design team done, and you have to do all the engineering calculations. So what I'm quite keen on the idea is that we standardize components that we can make buildings out of that have been designed once and engineered once, and also we can get volume into we can place volume with the manufacturers, and I think we'll get the cost down then quite a bit. I think the other thing which I alluded to in the presentation is that it's a very kind of multifaceted product, because it can do more things for you than just structure, and so the more you can exploit that, the less you spend on other things. So by exposing it, for example, we're not spending money on suspended ceilings and wall coverings and so on and so forth. So we do. So we're just building our first one. I think we'll be able to do a full cost comparison at the end of it. I think we took the view that it was probably going to be slightly more expensive the first time, but with all R&D, you have to invest a little bit to get to the answer. So and I think the industry needs to do a bit more of that.
Okay.
And just adding on that, and I totally agree with Jonathan around volume, and both CLC and Arcadis have been doing work on how you aggregate demand, particularly from the registered provider sector. So you create enough certainty in terms of the pipeline to encourage that investment in local manufacturing plants that, again, of course, start to reduce down the sort of transport costs and such like. So, this has been an argument that we've been having for as long as I've been in the industry, which is far too long, about, oh, if only you had the volume, then these modern methods of construction would be more economic. And in practice, nobody's ever got the volume up. So that's, again, a very important part of the sector deal and the recovery plan, is to sort of drive demand into these sectors.
Thank you. Well, I think we're pretty well out of time, really, for today, but I'd just like to thank all our presenters for their contributions, really interesting, and also the Confederation of Timber Industries for the support of today's event. And for anyone who wants to see the webinar again, it will be available to download, I believe, probably from tomorrow morning. But thanks everyone for listening.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.